Welcome back, everyone. So now we come to the meat of the course. There are three functions in DAX that are super important. We have calculate, filter, and all. Now, the reason these three functions are very important is because these three functions are essentially used in combination with all the other functions. So we're going to focus on them right now. There are a few examples that I want to cover, and we will go through them one by one. Let's first go to our Excel file and we will simply put our sales value in values. Excellent. Now do remember that you can either select the sales value that is coming from the original table, but because we have the total sales that we have created, it would be advisable to use this one. This would give you more control. Now there are two questions that I have for you, and just think about it. Question number one, what if you want to see the sales for all of the subcategories together? That means you want to see this number 2.29 million in all the rows. Why would you want to do that? Because if I keep the same number in all of these rows, then I can divide every subcategory by that grand total, which will tell me the percentage contribution, correct? And also, what if I want to see the sales for only one subcategory in all the rows? For example, I want to see 167380 in all the rows. So before we continue, I would like you all to think about it. Just take a minute or two and think about how you would go about doing it and what would be the advantage of doing something like that. Now remember, we can do this without using DAX. For example, if we right click and then we say show values as percentage of column total, it will tell us the percentage contribution. And if I right click on the value for accessories and we say show values as difference from accessories, it will tell me by how much is every other subcategory ahead or behind accessories. So if both these calculations are possible in a right click, why do we want to take that extra effort and create a DAX measure? The answer is very simple. When you do a calculation like this, the entire working is hidden from you. You don't get to know how is Power BI working behind the scene. The second reason is that if you want to present the working to somebody and probably give them the ability to modify it, you are not able to do that by simply clicking on an option. So you have to create the steps one by one. So we will start with the first one. We want to look at the total sales value, which is 2.29 million as a value in all of the records that we have. So let's do that. We will create a new measure and I'm going to call this measure as subcategory underscore all. And we will simply say that we want to find the sum of our sales. Now remember, because we have already done this calculation earlier, we don't need to write equal to sum of sales. We can simply write total sales, which is much simpler. But we want to apply a filter. What will happen is that if I only say equal to total sales and I press OK, you will notice that the 17 rows that I have are actually filtering my total sales, and it is, in a way, it is doing a good thing. It is doing a filtering for every single row, which means that it is automatically breaking this number 2297200 into the 17 subcategories. But I don't want that to happen, which means that we will have to edit the measure now and we will have to tell the formula that we don't want to see the value for every single subcategory individually. We just want to see the total value. For this, we will have to use a calculate function. What the calculate function does is it basically evaluates an expression in a context modified by filters. So let me explain that. Right now, my expression is total sales or the sum of sales, whichever way you look at it. Now, if I wanted to, I can simply end it here, but this would not really make any sense because we have not applied a filter. The filter that we want to apply is going to be all. And if you notice, what all does is it will return all the rows in a table or all the values in a column, ignoring any filters that might have been applied. Which means that even though we have 17 subcategories here, which means there is a filter in the pivot table, we want to ignore it. We want to ignore it even before we bring the value inside the pivot table, which means that within the measure, we want to ignore that filter. So what do we want to ignore? We want to ignore our subcategory like this. So what will happen that first the measure is calculated, but when the measure is calculated, it ignores all the subcategory split. That means that when this value will go inside the pivot, it will not pay attention to the subcategories that I have written here, and it will show the same number in all the rows. Let's see how this works. When I click on OK and close, you would notice that now it is giving us 2297200 for every single row. And if you take a moment and think about this, this is very, very useful and this is very powerful. Usually inside a pivot table, we are not able to keep two different levels like this. Like if I keep all my subcategories, then obviously the numbers are going to get filtered. But basically we are controlling that filter. We are telling Excel that we don't want that filter to be applied. Now, if I wanted to find the percentage contribution, we can again create a new measure. We can say subcategory percentage contribution, and this would be equal to my total sales divided by my subcategory all. So in the numerator, we have total sales. Now total sales is getting filtered by every single subcategory, but subcategory all is a constant which is not going to get filtered. When I press OK, you notice it gives us the percentage contribution like this. 7.29, 14.30, 14.37, these three are the largest, and then the total is 100%. Once again, please remember, we would have been able to do this even by simply right-click, show value as percentage of column total, and the results would have been the same, column D and column B. But the reason we have done this manually is not just to prove a point. The reason we have done it manually is that we can see the complete working. Additionally, the user has complete control over it. So wherever we want to make a tweak, we will be able to do that. Wonderful. Let's look at one more example. So we have looked at the grand total and accessories. I also want to show you how do you compare one region against all the others. So let's look at this problem statement first. I'm going to keep my region in my rows and sort the data largest to smallest. As you can see, we have West is the largest at 725 and the other three are 678, 501, 391. Now imagine you wanted to present the largest region in comparison to the other three. That means I want to group the other three. Now, even though we can right click and then group it, sometimes it doesn't work. For example, right now is not working. And this is not a very clean way of doing this. So what I want to do here is I want to create a filter that will only show me the value for the West region. And then I want to create another filter that will only show me the value for the other three regions except West. So very quickly, let's create a measure and we'll call this as sales only West, and this would be calculate total sales. And what is my filter? My filter this time is going to be a table and a filter expression, which means we want to filter the data before we find the total sales. So I know my table is called HMC orders. And what is a filter expression? Very simple, like we would have done on Excel as well. We will say that our region is equal to the West region. So this calculation is going to happen backwards. First, the entire table is going to get filtered. That means from the 9,994 records, only the ones for West are going to get filtered. And then I'm going to calculate the total sales. So you would see that it is now only going to show you the value for West like this. Right? So this is showing you the value for West. Now, once we have done this, we would also like to see the value for West, let's say for all the subcategories. So I'm going to keep the region outside and we will bring our subcategory inside. Now this is very interesting. This is showing you that the total sales for accessories is 167,380, but the value for West is only 61,140. Similarly, we can create another measure. We'll call this sales. And this time it will be except West. And this would be calculate total sales. And my filter here is going to be filter HMC orders. And my filter expression is that the region is not equal to West. Let's check the formula. I think a parenthesis has been left out. So the formula is working, and when I press OK, you will notice that we get two columns now. And obviously, if you add these up, you will notice that it is the same as the total sales. So 61,000 plus 106,000 is 167,000. So we don't really need the total sales right now, but I will keep it there and I want to show you why. Let's create a chart. So pivot table, pivot chart. And I will go to combo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep West and except West on my secondary axis and convert this into a stat column chart. Stat column and a stat column. All right. So what's going to happen is that your values are now going to look like this. Now, why can't you see the total sales amount? Obviously, because the total sales is actually hidden behind these numbers. So we will have to use a little bit of wizardry to be able to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'll keep the total sales as a clustered column. Just for now, we will double click. We will not be able to double click on a pivot table. So we'll right click and format the data series. And I will decrease the gap width. Okay. Once we have done this, let's go back to change chart type. I'm going to put only West and except West on the secondary axis as a stacked column like this. But you notice that we still cannot see the sales value. So like I said, we have to be a little smart here. What we'll do is I will keep all of these three as a clustered column. Watch carefully. All the three as a clustered column. And then I will only select the blue one and reduce the gap width and make it really large. Go back to change chart type. Now we want to put this as stacked and stacked and press OK. And now we can reduce the gap width and you will get a wonderful result like this. So let me just finalize this. Maybe increase this a little bit. Okay, let's increase the size so we can just delete the legend for now. Let's see what we have managed to create. The blue column is showing us the total sales, and the orange and the gray are actually showing us the sales for only the West and the other three combined. And this is a very powerful visualization. Something like this would not have been possible otherwise. And we have only managed to create this very interesting visualization where three of the regions have been clubbed together while one has been shown separately. And we have managed to do this because we have created a DAX measure. Let's look at the final example. I also want to show you how to filter in three different ways. We will do that in the next example. The same example that we have taken right now, I want to show you how to filter the data in three different ways.